Our next individual would be Cathy Costello. She'll be our next one speaking for 30 minutes and 5 minutes of questions. And just want to thank everybody. We've had fantastic speakers so far.
Can you hear me? Oh, you can hear me. Okay. You can hear me as well as on these mics? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm a stander, and I've been sitting for a while. First of all, my goodness, thank you to Representative Randy Randleman and Representative Colin Walkie for bringing together in a nonpartisan way a discussion that affects 1 in 4 Oklahomans, nearly 1 million people. I'm grateful to you. I was thrilled when I found out we had a mental health caucus, that we're coming together. We need to be coming together and working on something in a positive way. And you have no idea how many lives you are, and you will be, this is going to be awkward, you will be helping by what you're doing. So here's my goal for today. There's so much to say in 30 minutes, and I don't have enough time, so I'm going to just share with you my personal story so you can understand from a civilian how mental illness can impact a family and a community. And then I would like to speak on 2 programs that do exist in the state of Oklahoma that I am passionate about and feel strongly about, that I believe aids and helps families who have a loved one who deal with a mental health crisis. So, when I was 20 years old, I was a student at the University of Kansas, and I met my future husband, Mark Joseph Costello, who was the youngest of 4, born and raised in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And he was also attended the University of Kansas, got a business degree. I got a music degree in classical music and opera. Rock Chalk Jayhawk. And wonderful guy. He asked me to marry him 2 weeks later. Yes, he was a man who knew what he wanted. 2 weeks later, we were engaged. I graduated from college. We married, came to Oklahoma, and life was grand. We started businesses together. We worked together with a card table and 2 folding chairs. We started our first business, worked hard, ended up building 6 businesses and 8 industries around the world. We had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, built a beautiful house on 5 acres in Edmond. Life was perfect. Life was grand. I couldn't believe how blessed and how fortunate I was. In fact, I remember feeling guilty because our life was so great, our marriage was so great. I knew other families who had struggles, as I found out, we all do in this life sooner or later. We all encounter challenges, struggles, crosses. Mark, in 2010, pursued a lifelong dream of serving in public office. He had asked me earlier on, when the babies were little, if he could run for public office. And I said, no. I said, hey, we are building businesses. We are raising kids. I'm not supporting that. Our lives are full. He said, all right, I'm not going to do anything without your support. But in 2010, as a businessman and as someone who knew what it was like to sign the front and the back of a paycheck, we knew what it was like to, on certain times during the development of our businesses, had to reach in our own pocket to make payroll. We didn't take a salary, but we made sure our employees did. And we understood the dignity of work and what that brought to people, not only financially, but spiritually, and that we were created to be productive. He ran for the Oklahoma State Labor Commissioner and won overwhelmingly, and served for 4 years, and then ran again in 2014. And he loved what he was doing. So while he was running for office and we were raising our children, we have our second oldest child is a boy. His name is Christian. Now, Christian, he was different from my other children, and I recognized it from the womb. A mother knows these things, and he he had some struggles when he was younger, but the struggles were not personality or violence. His struggles were more cognitive. He was very slow to learn how to walk, talk, potty train, write his name. School was a tremendous challenge, but he was incredibly intelligent. And so that was kind of hard to bring that together. He'd have these struggles, but he wasn't a stupid kid. He was smart. And he had some interesting idiosyncrasies. We started noticing around the age of 10. He started repeating sentences to himself frequently. He would say a sentence and then say it and then whisper it and get quieter and quieter. But we just thought it was kind of an idiosyncrasy that he would outgrow. So we weren't worried about it. He was a loving child. He was gentle. He had friends. He never went to bed without kissing his mother and father goodnight. He never went to bed without saying his prayers. He thanked me for every meal I ever fixed him, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Was very affectionate, not violent, never got into fights with his brothers and sisters, never got into fights with his friends. He was really actually the perfect child for a parent to raise. Never had an ounce of trouble out of this kid. Christian was very artistic. He started becoming interested in filmmaking between 10, 12, 14. So we found ourselves purchasing video equipment and software, and pretty soon he was writing scripts and having the neighborhood kids over, and on a Saturday I'm making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Kool-Aid, and he's, making these films, and I'm starting to look at film school and found out it's very expensive. But I thought, hey, Christian is going to be another Steven Spielberg. Now, kind of like Steven Spielberg, his hair's a mess. He doesn't comb his hair, and he can't tie his shoes. He uses Velcro all the time, and he had difficulty holding a fork. Again, these cognitive issues. But I thought, hey, Steven Spielberg is a multimillionaire. He can't comb his hair, and he wears Velcro shoes with his tuxedo at the, Academy Awards. So who cares, And we fostered our children's interest and talents and loved the people that they were. So as he began to grow into his teen years and adolescent years, this habit that he had had of talking to himself continued, and it escalated. I remember going down the hall one time to put some linens away, and he was in the shower, and he was yelling and screaming and cussing, and I'm knocking on the door. Christian, are you okay in there? And he said, oh, yeah, I'm fine. Later, I said, what was all that going on in there? Oh, I'm just thinking out scripts in my head. Okay, so I bought that. Okay, scripts in his head. And then he began walking the streets of Edmond, sometimes in the middle of the summer, 99-degree weather, wearing snow boots, sweatpants, a heavy coat. This could be a harm to yourself. You could end up with heat stroke. And he'd be walking all over, and people would say, hey, I saw your son Christian walking. And he was miles away. And then sometimes the police would say, hey, son, they thought it was odd. How you doing? What's going on? Why are you wearing a coat? These things I thought were odd, but there's nothing illegal, nothing violent, no reason to be too terribly concerned, because I thought, and Mark thought, he was artistic. So this is what was going on. As Christian got into the teen years, we began to see something called mania. And he couldn't sleep at night. He would sometimes be awake for a couple of days. He would pace the floor at night. I would hear him. He'd be in the kitchen. This was concerning. When he was about 19 years old, we were at a Christmas party with about 30 of our close friends. Mark and I are sitting on the couch, and Christian's in the front doorway, and he's pacing back and forth and pacing back and forth. and he's talking to himself in an animated way. And I turned to Mark and I said, Mark, something is desperately wrong. This is not creativity. This is not thinking out scripts in your head. This behavior is indicative of something serious. So we sat down with Christian that weekend. We told him what we had observed, and we asked him, son, did you know that you were pacing and talking to yourself at the Christmas party? And for the first time, he said, no, I wasn't aware of that. I suspect that he hadn't been aware that he was talking to himself for a while, but he knew how to give us the answer that we wanted to hear. So I said, hey, can we go see a doctor? Yes. He was very compliant at that point. So we found a really good doctor in Oklahoma City. And you have to remember, parents of 5 kids, we'd never dealt with mental illness before, this kind of behavior. So we took him to the doctor, and he spent a lot of time with Christian, a lot of time with us, separately and together, and he came up with a diagnosis. And he said, I have a diagnosis for your son. Your son has something called schizoaffective disorder with psychosis. What is that? He said it's like a combination of schizophrenia with bipolar disorder. And psychosis means psychotic. He's having breaks from reality. Okay, this is not news a parent wants to hear. It was devastating, especially from this child who had been such a good and kind and loving young man. And I knew enough about schizophrenia to know it's not curable. You can take medication, you can have treatment, but it's not curable. And Representative, will you let me know when I have 10 minutes left? Okay, thank you. So Christian started a treatment program. We started taking him to therapy. He started medication. Except one thing about Christian and medication was that if he was given, say, an antipsychotic, which would bring that mania down, and say it was 250 milligrams of Seroquel, Christian would take 50 milligrams. He always fought with us on the amount of medication. And now I wonder if he was even taking his medication. And I couldn't figure it out, and I finally realized one day he felt so out of control of his life that was the one thing he could control. So if mom and dad and the doctor said, this is how much you need to take, he was going to make the decision of how much he was going to take. And I understand that better now. So I believe the judge had mentioned earlier NAMI. Mark and I heard about this organization, NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. We needed support. As the Oklahoma State Labor Commissioner, Mark didn't want to, at first, tell people that we had a mentally ill son. What if he wanted to run for higher office? How will people judge us? Are we bad parents? Christian didn't have schizophrenia because he didn't have a pony as a child. He was ill. A point came in Mark's career up here at the Capitol as he began to quietly talk to other people and realized that a lot of families deal with mental illness and substance abuse. And people with mental illness, they self-medicate oftentimes because their brains hurt. They don't feel right. They feel off. So he had a turnaround on that and became verbal, spoke up here at the Capitol, went to Tulsa, was visiting the county jail, visiting with the mental health department, Mental Health Association of Oklahoma. And so we had a turnaround on that. We went from being silent and embarrassed to saying, we have got to speak. Being silent isn't helping anybody. Christian began attending the NAMI support groups. You see, in one side, the families who have a loved one who suffer meet, and on the another room, you have the consumer, the person suffering with the mental health issue, so they can talk with other people. And there was a period of time in there where Christian was doing really, really well. He was on his medication, And as we believed in the dignity of work, he was working and he was engaging in the community and with his family. And we were having success. And it was we were pretty happy about that. At the age of 19, Christian had his first, what I consider, severe psychotic break. I don't have time to go into what happened, but he was escalating. He was angry. It was blown out of proportion. He was angry about something that had happened when he was 12 years old at a board game, 7 years earlier, and he was escalating, and I knew he was about to get in the car and drive over to somebody's house and have a fist fight, and we get the keys away from him, and we call the doctor. And he said, this is what you can do. We can call the police and have him taken to St. Anthony's, or you can call Walgreens and we can get an antipsychotic called Zyprexa in him. By the end of the evening, we finally got a pill in his mouth. And within 15 to 20 minutes, Christian came out of his room and he said, "Mom and Dad, I am so sorry for the way I was behaving. I don't know what got into me." And I said, "Christian, have you been taking your medication?" And he kind of hangs his head and he says, "No, I haven't." "Mom and Dad, will you please help me stay on my medication? I now know I do better on my medication." So that is very important because it leads into the AOT bill that we have now. But very briefly, and I think this is important because nobody has spoken about this, what is mental illness and what causes it? This is something we're not talking about. Mental illness is a chemical imbalance in the brain. When someone becomes paranoid, when somebody becomes delusional, they think that car bomb is being put under their car, they think their dad works for the government, so he's spying on everybody, the norepinephrine in the brain surges. People who become severely depressed, you see these celebrities, they have everything, millions of dollars, fame, and they commit suicide, and people will say, "Well, what is the matter with them? They had everything." But they had suffered with depression for years, and they had clinical depression where the dopamine in the brain bottomed out. So this is a chemical imbalance. And gosh, I have so many more things I'd like to tell you about this. So why don't people take their medication? People with schizophrenia have a condition called anosognosia. That means no insight. They don't realize, because the front of their brains, which are affected by severe bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, they do not realize that they are ill. Therefore, they don't take their medication. This is a major challenge. So on August 23rd of 2015, my husband had this habit of meeting with his son every other week, and he would give him cash. I didn't like it, but he said that was his way of getting in front of his son so he could look in his eyes and see, do you need food? Do you need to see a doctor? Are you struggling? And he would go and have his father-son time. But on August 23rd, we had just taken child number 4 to University of Mississippi and moved her in and just come back. On Sunday night, we met him, and Mark asked me to come along. And our son told us at dinner that he had quit taking his medication, and Mark just shook his head and he kind of whispered to me, "This is not good." And about 15 minutes later, our son had a psychotic break, thought that we were with the FBI, really weren't certain that Mark was his father. And he had a knife, and he slit my husband's throat, severing his carotid artery in his jugular vein. He stabbed Mark 17 times, collapsing one of his lungs. And I held my husband in my arms, and I told him how much I loved him, and I told him to ask God to forgive me of my sins, and to be prepared to meet his Maker. No family in this state or any other state should have to go through what we went through. And we did everything we could. We had Christian in and out of 10 different facilities. We paid $150,000 out of our own pocket. I remember lamenting, why can't we keep our son on his medication? I wish we had a way. Mike Brose of the Mental Health Association of Oklahoma told me 6 weeks after my husband died, we have something called court-ordered medication. And we have this great judge, her name is Judge Kirsten Pace, and she's been doing it for 20 years in Tulsa. Nobody had heard about it over here. To move forward, because I don't have enough time, 10 weeks after I buried my husband, I was in this room and I testified to the AOT, Assisted Outpatient Treatment Bill, based on Kendra's Law. A man with schizophrenia who was off of his medication in New York and pushed Kendra onto the tracks of an oncoming subway in New York City. And let me tell you, my oldest daughter lived there for 8 years until February. Every time I went to visit her, I was just like, you're too close, you're too close. I'm pulling her back. I'm so afraid that was going to happen. So this Kendra's Law came to Oklahoma. We have 47 states that use it now, but they named it the Labor Commissioner, Mark Costello, Assistant Outpatient Treatment Act. And I had a wonderful visit just last night with Sergeant Lori Osborne. Sergeant Lori Osborne works full-time with the mental health department, and all she does is assisted outpatient treatment. We got a $2 million grant obtained through Congressman Tom Cole, which lasted from, let me get my statistics here, okay, from 2016 to 2020, and we worked very hard, the Department of Mental Health did, to obtain another grant, which now is from 2020 to 2024. So here are some counties that have AOT. Canadian, Potawatomi, Kay, Payne, Mays, Tulsa, and Oklahoma. The facilities include in the grant are Red Rock and Grand Lake. Sergeant Lori told me that working with AOT is the most fulfilling and rewarding aspect of her entire law enforcement career. So, does it help? She told me just last night in Oklahoma County alone, they had 63 clients. Prior to AOT, those 63 clients, those 63 individuals accounted for 274 arrests. Once these individuals entered the AOT program, those same 63 individuals accounted for only 64 arrests. Of those 63, prior to AOT, those individuals accounted for 357 mental health interventions involving police. Those same 63 individuals, while in the AOT program, accounted for only 99 mental health interventions with police. And I'm going to quote something she told me last night. If that's not proof it works, I don't know what is. I'm here to encourage you to help continue this program. There are a few counties that do not have any federal money, but they believe in it so much that they are pulling together and struggling to get resources to provide this because of these kinds of results. You see, we do have an element of people in our state who are so sick that just having a nice talk with them and patting them on the back and quieting them down and putting them in a corner isn't going to work because of the surge of norepinephrine in their brain. And those are the people that cause harm to themselves and others. We don't want another school shooting. We don't want another Mark Costello incident. All right, I've got 2 minutes left. I want to mention one other thing that I'm a huge believer in, and that's CIT training, Crisis Intervention Training for Police Officers. In fact, I'm going to Cushing this afternoon to present to the police department there. I do this all over the state. I am overwhelmed and impressed and touched by the number of police officers who want to help those individuals in a mental health crisis. And I'm telling you, when you have somebody who's holding a knife or a gun, who is threatening you, a family member, someone else, you do need police to intervene. It happens. I get calls every week from parents all over the state. And let me tell you, I've had police officers call me that don't know how to deal with their own child, judges, doctors, nurses, teachers, pharmacists. So we need them. We need to support our police in this. Oftentimes, they're the first people they encounter in a mental health crisis could be a police officer. My personal experience has been when our son was in a crisis, If a CIT, crisis intervention trained police officer showed up, our son ended up in the crisis center or at St. Anthony's. But if we got a police officer who was not trained, he ended up in the county jail. And sometimes we didn't know where he was for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. So I want to encourage you to support our police officers in any way we can with CIT, AOT. Oh gosh, there's just so much more to say. Let's meet again. So, all right, that's probably it. So, questions, and I'm because
Thank you
of
very
the
much,
subject, I'm an
Cathy.
open book, so you can ask me anything.
Thank you very much. And,
absolutely.
that is awesome and things that we have to deal with directly. And just to share a little bit with you, when I tested at the psychiatric unit at Tulsa Regional Medical Center and also in private practice, probably at least 2 of those in private practice each month.
Wow.
So schizoaffective disorder is not that rare. So we have
Right.
to deal with a lot of things like that. Thank
You
you
are
for your
right.
story.
right.
Questions, please.
Wow.
No questions?
I must have done a
Okay.
good job. Do you have a question? I'm sorry? So the question was, where is my son now? So after working for 2.5 years with our district attorney and the public defender, and on my knees every day without fail, that the right and just thing would happen for Christian, our family, and for the state. Christian was adjudicated before Judge Elliott and found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he is residing in Veneta, Oklahoma. He is on the shot that the judge was referring to is the Invega shot. Right now, it's the best treatment for mental illness. And by the way, these mental health drugs, they're not a panacea. They have side effects. They have unpleasant side effects that none of us would probably enjoy. Weight gain, constipation, impotence. I mean, it's a hard thing. But, when you have a loved one who is causing issues, you just want to take that pill and be safe and calm down. So, Christian has had multiple psychotic breaks. When you have untreated multiple psychotic breaks, each one is worse than the previous one. It can actually cause brain damage because it's a surge of chemicals. My belief is that he will probably be there for the rest of his life, and I pray to God he is. We are not that family that is trying to get our son out. We know he's in the safest place. I've been told multiple times, even psychiatrists that still see him, that he cannot function outside of that Veneta. I thank God for Veneta. And friends, we need more beds, we need more staff, and our staff needs to be protected. I hear this from psychiatric nurses and doctors and facilities around the state, because when people are violent, it's a career where people actually experience physical harm and are attacked. And so anyway.
Just know that with these kind of disorders, you can have the depression. The psychotic features can come in for a week window, maybe a 2-week window, then disappears, and it can come back immediately. So that's a real caution.
Actually, some people with schizophrenia actually get a little bit better, I have read, into their 40s and 50s if they had an early onset, which is common in late teens to early 20s.
Yes, and it depends. Usually these kind of disorders show up at 16, 17 years old, but I've had about 5 cases of childhood schizophrenia where it can show up at different times, so it varies.
Yeah, and so I wonder, too, with Christian, representative asked me in the office if I had seen signs earlier. Well, you think schizophrenia, you think crazy behavior, violent behavior. That's not what we saw. But I remember back with the talking to himself. Now I wonder if that was a red flag that I didn't recognize, and it wasn't problematic. So,
Yes.
but that probably was a sign
right.
earlier on. So, any other questions? All right, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for serving the state, the elected officials here. I appreciate you more than you know. Thank